So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending today, and we look forward to having a good discussion and to learn a lot from our two presenters today. My name is Emily Rimland. I'm the current convener of the ACRL Digital Badge Interest Group. And just so you know, as you may have heard, this meeting will be recorded. We'll make it available later. But thank you for joining us today. We have just a little bit of sort of housekeeping to go over before we get started, but it won't take too long. If you haven't already, if you could respond to the poll that I have going in the WebEx connection right now. We have most responses, but one last second, maybe we'll get a couple more, and then we have a second poll. Just to give you a little bit of background about this interest group, it started in 2014, and we did just get a renewal from ACRL for another 3 years, so that's great. We'll be around for another 3 years for sure. As of August, which are the latest numbers that we have available to us, we had 265 members, which is actually a 31% increase from the last year, so a lot of people interested in digital badges and micro-credentialing. And before we get started, I just want to kind of point out, like I said, a couple housekeeping things. So let me advance my slide here. I did want to introduce everybody to our two incoming co-conveners. They are online with us today. Kelsey O'Brien and Victoria Race are both here. Kelsey will actually be moderating the chat for us today, and Tori will do the wrap-up at the end of today's session. So now you have a sense of what they look like, but they're also available for questions or any help. And then I did want to mention, too, that Michael LaMagna, he may not be able to join us today, but hopefully he can. But he is also our outgoing convener, so you can say hi to him if you see him in the chat as well. Before I move on, I want to close this poll, and I will start the second one when I am able to. But it looks like, let me share the results here. It's taking a couple seconds to finish up here. Are you able to see the poll results?
Yeah, they look good, Emily.
Okay, I actually can't see them, but it looks like I actually can't see the results. So let me open poll 2 for now. And so if you can go ahead and respond to that. In the meantime, we'll go over some of the interactivity stuff today. So I put all this on a slide, but we've already talked about the polls. The other thing we'll mention today, and I think Kelsey's going to put this in the chat, but this is a link to our LibGuide for the Digital Badge Interest Group. And you might want to open that up in another window and have that handy, because we are going to use it later towards the end of the session. And we're going to ask you to respond there with your sort of one key takeaway of something that you learned today at the talk from the speakers. So that's under the collaborative space section of that LibGuide. And like I said, just kind of keep it in the back of your mind, and we'll come back to it towards the end. But we're going to be asking you, like I said, what is like the one key takeaway you have from today's session? And I also just wanted to point out in that LibGuide is a discussion section, which is new, and we're welcoming you to go ahead and create posts there or questions related to digital badges, and that will allow us to have interactivity discussion outside of just today's meeting. I already mentioned Kelsey will be moderating the chat, and so if you have questions or anything like that, feel free to put them into the chat, and she's going to collect them and ask the speakers at the end of their part any questions that come in for that speaker. So we will do Q&A at the end of the two speakers' presentations today. And I see that Kelsey put that link in the chat box. Thank you. So
Emily, in general, the results were 5 people have a badging program set up, 2 people or 3 people to work in progress, 3 people no, and then a couple no responses.
Okay, great. So that's awesome. And I am closing the other poll, and it seems to take a couple seconds to show the results, but then I can't see the results. But that one should be available as well. So that's the question about how long have you been involved in badging, and I could see it before I closed it, and it looked like most people said 1 to 3 years. So that's great. Well, without further ado, then I am going to introduce our speakers briefly. You saw their complete bios in the invitation that we sent out, but just to quickly recap, first we're going to have Amanda Rose Fuller. She's been working in the field of education for the last decade. She started in Tennessee with a pit stop in Europe, finally landing in Aurora Public Schools. From planning professional development to coaching teachers to recognize the 21st century skill development in their instruction, Amanda Rose is dedicated to helping her district successfully implement the digital badge program to ensure all students are given access to credentials, which open doors for opportunity. And then after Amanda, we have Megan. She's the head of information literacy and the communication arts librarian at Southern Methodist University. There she leads the efforts to build successful information literacy programming for the libraries. She's developed a certificate program that teaches information literacy skills to advertising undergrads. She also serves on the Communication Studies Committee for ACRL Education and Behavioral Sciences section, as well as the Instruction section Communications Committee. So I want to welcome Amanda and Megan and thank them for presenting today. And with that, I'm going to give Amanda presenter status so that she can go ahead and share her slides.
Thank you so much, Emily. Alrighty, give me just a second. I'm going to share my screen so that way I can present to you guys today. Are we good? Can you guys see?
Looks good.
Great. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is Amanda Rose, and I'm excited to present to y'all today and to share just really the basics of our program and sort of how we got started. So our program was initially created in hopes that all students could have access to credentials. Our superintendent developed a strategic plan, which we call APS 2020, and really he went out to the community, and this is what the community was telling us that they needed for our students. And so as opposed to other strategic plans which might focus on percentages around reading success or math success, this one is really about these credentials and skills that our students are developing. This slide, I think the most important thing to mention about our progress is that we began with an equity lens in mind. So how can we ensure that all of our students in Aurora Public Schools, which is P12, have equitable access to credentials? You might not have an international baccalaureate program at the school where your student goes, or you might not have access to a work-based certificate. But with badging, we really ensured that all students would have access to a credential. I think that one of the key components that really helped to drive our success is that we piloted in the very beginning of our program, and that since that moment, we have never stopped getting user feedback. So we are talking to our teachers, talking to our parents, talking to our students, really finding out what's working, what's not working, and making tweaks and changes along the way to ensure its success. In addition, talking to our community and finding out what do you need for your future workforce? What type of skills do you think are valuable for future employees? Or talking to colleges, what are skills that you believe that students need in order to be successful? And where we're at right now is really just building capacity. So we issued, right over 10,000 badges last year. So how can we ensure that we're continuing with that momentum, as well as that this program continues to be quality and badges that are issued are quality as well. Having the right people at the table has also been sort of one of those instrumental parts of the success of our program. In the very beginning, somebody that really helped us was our project manager. when you get a lot of creatives at the table and you're sort of going around and you have this grand idea and this grand idea, having someone to ground the work and saying, hey, we just created a 4-year plan and that's not in our plan. Like, let's get back to what we initially said we really wanted to focus on. So I think in the beginning, having that person with that lens sort of drive the work was really important. And since then, we have had a couple different iterations of our team. It's really just, hey, who do we think now could offer a unique perspective that they could bring that to the table and help to inform where our program is going? So are we bringing in instructional coordinators who are out there working alongside teachers? Do we have our learning resources people at the table, IT? Like, who's at the table that's going to help drive the work? So that team continues to change and morph depending upon what we need. This is a picture of our badge system, and our top tier badges, which we call summit badges, those are woven in and out of the Colorado state standards. So that was a really important part of our program when we were in the initial phases of creating it, is that we wanted these skills that our students are already developing in school to be recognized. However, they aren't recognized traditionally on their report card. So our students aren't getting a grade for information literacy, even though that's a skill that's being developed through P12 and that they're utilizing in their classrooms every single day. So what could we do to help notice and name those skills in the classroom? We can badge them. And what our team did is we then looked at those skills and we thought, well, what does it really mean to be somebody that has the skills of information literacy? What does it really mean to be an inventor or to be self-directed? So our team did bunches of research. They were looking at ISTE standards and looking at tons of other research that was out there. And then they broke those summit badges, which are our top tier badges, apart more granularly. And that's where we got those smaller badges, which we call journey badges. So as students earn journey badges, they go on their journey to then sort of reach their summit. So we're in Colorado, so we like to use the mountains to help our students sort of understand that, is that, you know, this is a journey throughout school or throughout a project, throughout an assignment where you might develop these smaller skills, and in the end you're rewarded with this bigger badge, this summit badge. The way that a student earns a badge is that we have developed a one-sentence definition of criteria for each one of our badges. So for example, we have a systems digital badge. So we have a definition for our systems badge. However, what that looks like in a pre-K classroom is going to be really different than what it looks like in a 3rd grade classroom. It could be really different than what it looks like in a 4th grade tech classroom as opposed to a 6th grade history classroom. So we thought that if we could come up with this one-sentence definition, then how that's interpreted at each grade level and each class could be so different, and how valuable is that? So we didn't want to hand something totally prescribed to our teachers and say, this is the one way that our students can develop the skill of systems. What we want to say is, here's our definition for systems. What does this look like when developed in your classroom? What type of systems are your students working on when they're researching for a history project as opposed to doing a science experiment? And so that's why we just have this one-sentence definition as opposed to a prescriptive way that a student can earn a badge at every single grade level. Once our students earn that top tier badge, that summit badge, it's important for us in Aurora that these badges don't just live in our public schools. So what we really need is we really wanted for our community to look at these badges and see the value in them. So what we did is we have a member of our team, and his job is primarily to get out to the community, to talk to them about our badge system, and then to bring them in as one of our community partners, or we call them our endorsers. So we currently have 53 endorsers in our community. And when a student earns a summit badge, they then have a door of opportunity open where they can connect with some of our endorsers. Here's some of them that we have here. And they can have a hands-on learning experience with them. So for our younger grade bands, for example, P2 and 3-5, we're actually bringing those companies to that school, into that classroom, to provide that experience for our students. So for example, we had a florist, Project Floral, go into a classroom yesterday, and they were bringing in tons of different materials to make wired boutonnieres and wired corsages. And we're just sort of talking to them about the skills that were needed in not only the creation of those items, but what does the business side look like in the background. Most of our students in Aurora Public Schools, they pretty much just know about the careers that are within their neighborhood. I know what my auntie does, I know what my dad does, and I know about the jobs that are in the 2-block radius of my house. But I never knew that I could actually take these skills for badges that I've earned, that I could actually take for these badges that I've earned and do something with them. When a student transfers from one grade band, so for example, they go from P2 to 3-5, for example, their badges don't delete. However, they do restart as far as that learning opportunity goes. So let's say that we have a 5th grade student who has earned recognition, research, and systems, and then they go to 6th grade. Their opportunity for that learning experience restart, and in 6th grade, then must earn all 5. That was really important for our endorsers. They were telling us, you know, we don't know if we feel comfortable potentially offering internships to a 9th grade or a 10th grade or 11th grade student with badges they earned in 3rd grade. So that's sort of why we decided to have some grade bands to break those apart. These are just some examples of our endorsers, and you can see we do have some bigger companies and then also a lot of local ones as well. And if you click on this link, and I can make sure that this link gets out to you guys too, you can see our full list and of all the different companies that we have here in APS. Our goal this year is to get to 55, so we're pretty close. We just have 2 more to go. Tons of ways that students can earn badges. Really, I wanted to just focus on these 2 that are right here, which are students can apply for badges, which is about 80% or more of our students, or that teachers can award badges. So really the only time I tell teachers that they should be awarding badges to students instead of students taking that ownership and applying is if we're in those younger grades where maybe they have don't typically access technology, or maybe they don't even have technology. So that's when I would say, hey, as a teacher, you can issue a badge to that student. But in most cases, it's always our students applying for them, and then our teachers saying, yes, this evidence, because our badges are all evidence-based, this evidence does work for this badge, yes, you get the badge, or you know what, I'm going to decline this badge because I am not seeing quality work. You're not really meeting that within its definition of criteria. And all of our badges are issued through Credly. So my last 2 slides are just some examples. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I thought it would be helpful to see some of the different ways that our students could develop information literacy skills. So in a Kinsey classroom, it might be something as simple as following picture directions to get logged in and log into Google accounts. Man, I've been into support in some Kinsey and 1st grade classrooms recently with this. And let me tell you, this is no easy feat. So for our students to earn the system badge in a kindergarten classroom, this could be a great example of that. And probably the teacher would decide, hey, you know what, I'm not going to have these students apply, but I'm going to issue the badge on behalf of the student. You know, this could also be a badge if we have a student with special needs. This could potentially be a goal of theirs in a middle school classroom. I'm going to learn how to open up my computer and log in to my Google account. So in APS, it doesn't matter if you are a student with special needs or a student with limited English proficiency. What our badges do is they meet you where you are with your skill development. A couple other examples there. For example, a teacher might be working in a 3rd grade classroom and really wanting her students to recognize those digital tools that could be used within a Google presentation. And so maybe that student is applying for a badge using a Google presentation that includes all of those tools. And the teacher would then decide, yes, the student gets the badge, or no, they don't. My last slide is just showing some 6 through 12 examples. So looking at the research example is that students will research those historical events, and their evidence could then be the research paper, but also that bibliography, really going back to what that definition is. Were they using ethical sources? Did they evaluate that source before they used it? On our website, we have tons of other examples, and again, I'll make sure that you guys get this presentation so you could see. as well as when you're on the website, this document and the way that it's laid out for this page and the previous one is really similar to what our teachers do when they are planning out ways that their students can earn badges. So I spend tons of my time in classrooms coaching teachers towards recognizing 21st century skill development that's occurring in their lessons, and they would fill out a document really similar to this. That way they know, hey, this is the opportunity that my students have to earn the badge, and this is their evidence. For older students, I would say probably like 5th grade and up, we see teachers sharing this document within Google Classroom or Schoology or whatever it is that they're using. So students actually have access to this. They know exactly what they need to do to earn that badge. So I'm going to stop sharing now and head back to the chat. And I would love to answer any questions that you guys have about badging and anything that you want to know about our program.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This is Kelsey, and that was a great presentation. Gave us a nice overview. So I encourage everyone again, if you have any questions, to go ahead and put them in the chat. We do have one question from Tori, who is our incoming co-convener for this group. And she is curious as to how you developed partnerships with your external partners and how you marketed this.
So I can speak a little bit towards this. However, my coworker Josh Cush, he's our that's like his landscape. He would probably be much better at answering this question. But in the beginning, it was really just getting out there in the community and talking to people. Because you might go to a business professional and mention the word badging, and they're like, huh? A what? A digital what? Like, they don't understand those words. So by putting the badge system in front of them and really talking about skills and using that as our focus, that was a way that we were able to pull companies in. I think also is what these companies were seeing, a lot of them were seeing a lack of skill development in the workforce or in internships. Students that are not arriving on time. That's really connected to our self-direction badges. Students that maybe aren't able to really critically think through a problem. They're so used to Googling something and getting an answer. And so what we like to tell them is, well, we have a badge that's all around critical thinking. And so our endorsers are really seeing that they have a need in the workforce to have future employees that have those skills. And you know what, this pipeline starts in elementary school. Like if we don't start now with the recognition of skill development with our students, then it's going to be really hard to then start doing that when they're a lot older. The #1 companies that we were seeing in the beginning that were most attracted to what we were doing were definitely our sort of invention, out-of-the-box, startup type companies. Like they immediately were saying, yes, I want to get involved. Where our bigger companies like McDonald's and Home Depot definitely took a little bit more like crawling through the bureaucracy of what their company is to sort of get in there before we were able to touch base with someone and have them see the value of what it is that we were doing.
Yeah, I love your connection with your community partners. I think actually having them come into the classroom to talk to students is really important. And when we think about developing badges, I think a lot of times people just come up with something that they think is a great badge, but isn't necessarily something that is in demand. So I think that's a really great way to make that connection for the employers and for the students. Tori had a similar question as to what I was thinking, which is how do your students actually display these badges? Are they displaying them to employers in some way through Credly or through Mozilla Backpacks? What I'm kind of thinking about is the fact that these are younger students who most likely don't have something like a LinkedIn account or a digital portfolio. So I'm wondering how you encourage them to share their achievements.
So that is something that we've definitely been working on since we started the program. We like to use the analogy of monopoly money. If our badges are stuck in APS, it's like monopoly money. Only good when you play Monopoly, right? What we need is we need this to be a currency that can be traded and seen in many other arenas. So this year, because we do have so many other students, we created sort of like a non-participation form with digital badging. We definitely have some hoops to crawl through with data privacy because so many of our students are under 14. So we did create a form this year that allowed guardians to opt their students out of the program specifically for that purpose. And what we saw was that most of the students that opted out were the younger students, and their accounts were then turned off. So now what we can do is that any student that is in high school and has not opted out, so who has not chosen not to participate, has their sharing turned on. So we could go in and basically work through Credly to figure out how to make all this happen. And I would also like to mention that this is happening currently right now. So the code is being written right now to get all of the sharing turned on for our high school students who are of the correct age and who have not opted out of the program. So that way they can post to LinkedIn, they can, you know, take these badges out and basically use them in any way that they see fit. For our seniors that are leaving, we send them an email with instructions about how to create their own Credly account. And we also worked with Credly on this, so that way they could make sure that those badges, again, didn't just live in the APS Credly portal, but that they were able to take them and do anything that they would like with them.
And have you followed up with any of your students who have graduated? I'm just curious, you know, if they have used their badges at all in terms of getting into college or talking with employers. I know you have a lot of work to do with your current students, but it would be really neat to hear from students who have graduated and what they've done with their badges.
Yeah, that is definitely something that is on our agenda and something that we would like to do. Our students that graduated last year that had badges is a pretty small number. And last year was our first full year of implementation because the year before that, we didn't launch to everyone until January. So the number of students who we have out in the world who have earned badges, and even summit badges, is extremely small. So our goal is to go another full year of implementation and then figure out what are the questions we want to ask these students, how can we reconnect with them and continue to have this conversation with them around badges.
That's great. So I'll give it one more minute if anyone else wants to ask a question, and then we will move on to our next presentation. If you do think of any questions for Amanda or for Megan as Megan is presenting, we should have some time at the end to get back to those as well. But thank you so much, Amanda.
Would it be helpful if I posted the link to the presentation, or is that something that I should, and I could post it into the chat?
Sure, yeah, if you want to share that, that's wonderful.
Great.
Okay, so Amanda, if you could just pass the ball to Megan, I think. Yeah, so we should be able to pass that on. And Megan, you can get started when you're ready.
Okay.
Great, thank you so much, guys.
I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my slides and hear me?
Yep,
Looks
good.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to talk today about career-focused badging, and this is very, very similar to our previous presenter about connecting to the career, but this is at the university level. So I will introduce myself first. My name is Megan Hoyer, and I'm the Head of Information Literacy and Communication Arts Librarian at Southern Methodist University. And so advertising is one of my specific subject areas that I created the badging program for. So I kind of broke today down into two topics. I thought I'd give an overview of our program here, which is the Temerlin Information Literacy Program, and then go into considerations for others who might want to develop a career-focused badging program. So the Temerlin Information Literacy Program is specifically for our advertising department, which is the Temerlin Institute. So you'll notice that the that the name of our program bears the name of the school. In terms of logistics, it is a mix of online and live instruction. And the reason we did this is, first of all, for scalability, so that we didn't have to do everything live. That we really, for things like basic use of tools, introduction to information types, that sort of thing, we use online tutorials for that through LibWizard. But that there was really a need for live instruction as well, because our program has a lot of rigor to it, and there are some learning experiences that you just can't recreate in an asynchronous tutorial. This program is embedded in multiple courses, so for students taking that course, they are automatically enrolled in this badging program. And we have a couple of tracks, so that's why it doesn't hit the same students. So there's a couple of tracks of students that get access to this program. We wanted to offer it to any students who wanted to participate. So I also do instruction outside of the classroom through outside workshops. And we do have a few students who elect to do this program just on their own and work through it. It is quite rigorous, so the struggle is that it is a lot of work on top of their coursework, but we have a few students who really do see the value and choose to do that. We just have 2 levels of badges. The reason we did that is we really just wanted to represent summative learning. And this kind of thing is very familiar to them in the advertising field and also in other business-related fields. They tend to do certificate programs like AdWords, like Google AdWords has a certificate, and so they're used to having to work through a program in order to achieve a certificate, in order to, and they get recognized at the summative level. We thought that just recognizing that summative level was really all that was needed rather than a bunch of individual badges. And then it's delivered through Canvas, and we do use Credly badges. Using, and if you have Canvas or some other, course management system, it's really easy to get a non-course kind of program set up in there. It helps kind of just put all the materials in one place. You can enroll students in there. It made it a lot easier to do that. And we use the Credly badges. All our students are required to have LinkedIn accounts, so it works really well with the expectations from the department. In terms of curriculum, this is very specific to the discipline, and that's really purposeful. The student learning outcomes use language of the industry. Student learning outcomes are very public. That's part of our transparency, and we want employers to see that and really recognize sort of the skills and the concepts that are important to them. There's been studies that show that employers don't necessarily associate information literacy with that kind of deep critical thinking. They see it sort of as a very technical skill, and so we want to help illustrate the depth really of the program. The curriculum, so I gave you some examples of the kind of things that we cover in our curriculum, and I will talk about curriculum a little bit more in a minute. But it's very specific to the kind of information skills that students will need in the advertising field. So the kind of, formal and informal problems or information that they'll have to use. They'll have to use internet search skills. They'll have to be able to evaluate surveys. So we really tried to think about those kind of meta-literacy skills. The idea of synthesis and critical thinking is incredibly important to the employers in this field, and so we really emphasize work in those areas. In terms of assessment, the tests are on performance of typical workplace information problems or scenarios. So they are given an authentic information problem. Some of these have come in. I've had faculty members who also work in the industry who have approached me with things. I've used things from faculty. So these are real kind of information problems that people have had to work on, and they are asked to work on that. They're asked to track their thought process as they are researching. It's a bit logy to do this, but I feel like we really get a lot of good information about how they're thinking through their problems. It's graded both by me and an instructor, and so we kind of set up this two two-pass system that I go through and do the first pass and make recommendations according to a rubric. That allows me to do a lot of the legwork, because to really grade these things properly takes time. You need to hunt down all the sources they found. You need to see the information that they're actually looking at, and you need to know what information is out there on that they didn't find. And so I tend to do the first pass and make a lot of comments, and the instructor does the second pass and assigns the final grade, which has worked out quite well. So in terms of considerations for career-focused badging, I thought I'd start with, why do this in the first place? It is obviously a lot of effort, so why even endeavor on this? Curriculum and workplace information literacy is a really important consideration when you're putting together career-focused badging. And also the idea of creating legitimacy. This is something that is a promise to employers, and how do we build that legitimacy? So in terms of why do this, I really think it is important if we are really saying that we want to teach our students lifelong learning, that we think about how to help them transfer their understandings about information literacy into their real life after college. And that transfer is very difficult. And it's difficult because context for academic work is very different than the context of work that they do once they have a career. And I will talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But career-focused badging, it's really kind of a natural fit. You're creating a badge, they're able to directly use that badge on their resume. And honestly, in terms of motivating college students, getting ready for work is at the top of their minds. Education is quite expensive. The economy's been tight. They really are motivated to help build their resume. So thinking about curriculum in the workplace and workplace information literacy, if this is something that is of interest to you, there's really a lot of great literature out there. A lot of it's written by business librarians. There's a lot of great literature specifically on workplace information literacy. So I recommend digging into that. But just briefly, if we're thinking about the workplace information environment, it's really different than the academic environment. And this is, as I mentioned before, this makes transfer difficult. Problems are undefined. You're not given an assignment and told this is your question, or this is what you're going to research, or I need this many sources. You have until the end of the semester to complete this. Things are very undefined. It's very fluid. So in working with the students, and I have noticed that we spend a lot of time trying to help define those boundaries. They're constantly asking, what does good look like? How do I know I have enough? Or how do I figure out what I should be using? So workplace is really fluid. It's developed socially. A lot of information is passed through conversations, through that community of people in the workplace who decide the kind of information that they think is important or relevant. They potentially use formal and informal types of information. It's not a typical academic environment where, they're required to find peer-reviewed sources. It's really a much wider thing, and they have a lot of different types of information problems that require them to think about the level of information that they need. So, recommendations for instructions: provide a business context. Like we provide them with scenarios that they may run across in the advertising world. These are real life information problems. Have them practice with limited sources. They may not have access to all of the wonderful things your library has, and they need to get an experience with that. And the other thing that we do is allow for extended learning with informal networks. In other words, allow them to engage with research and finding information in a more social way. We do a lot of work with recognizing features of information. This is because the tools that they're using at the library may be very different than the ones that they get when they join the workforce. We do a lot of problem-based learning, ill-structured problems, and we combine that with communication. So this involves group work, having to present and talk about the information that they're finding, allowing for them, when they're working on a project, allowing them to ask questions, allowing them to engage with their peers in order to come to answers. This is not something that they go off and do on their own, completely solo, and then come back as if it were a formal academic test. And that communication piece is really important to employers. You need a lot of iterative practice and feedback. And because the fact that we're creating an environment where it's problem-based, where it's ill-structured problems, where they're not given a lot of clues, we have to do a lot of work with helping them recognize what does good look like. We even have discussions about that, and they just need time to practice through these things. We address various literacies, as I mentioned before, and that could really, whatever is appropriate for that area of work that they're going into. It could be that they need to understand survey information. They might need some statistical literacy. They might need some media literacy. It's really thinking outside that traditional information literacy box. And we work with a rubric. And so the rubric helps us to have those what does good look like discussions. What would be considered a deep enough work. And so, speaking of what good looks like, in supporting transfer, we really are looking for indicators of good information behaviors. We're not looking for expert level work. These students still have learning to do in terms of understanding the content areas. Furthermore, we're not, while we need them to know how to use the tools that we have, they may have different tools when they go on to the workplace. So we need them to have a deeper conceptual understanding of information literacy, and they need to develop dispositions. And so these are the things that we're looking for that are reflected in our rubric. So strategic thinking, are they planning through their research? Are they recognizing an appropriate source types and able to connect that to the questions that they're asking? Are they able to break down problems? For perseverance, do they keep going when they have an ill-structured problem? We specifically engineer experiences that elicit initial failure, and we're seeing, can you push past that? Are you willing to find multiple perspectives, or are you satisfied when you find one or two things that seem to answer the question? For tolerance of ambiguity, we specifically ask them to recognize the weaknesses of even the information that they do use. They could judge information to be good enough to be useful, and they still need to recognize where it might be weak or where it might not apply to their purpose. We have exercises where they're asked to synthesize competing pieces of information. This exercise, we do get a lot of light bulbs that go off. I've had sessions where I'm giving them pieces of information that say different things, and then they ask me, well, which one is the good one? As if it's very black and white. Which one is right? And I say they're all good sources of information. You're looking at the same numbers but interpreted differently. And that really can help them come to a better understanding about the complexity of information. And finally, ethical awareness. And this is really ethical awareness beyond academic plagiarism. We do talk about that a little bit, but they learn a lot more about copyright, specific ethical decisions that you might have to make in the workplace around the use of information. And on their test, that's represented by real scenarios. You are making this ethical decision. How do you choose what to do? So for creating legitimacy, we're really looking at three things. And the first is collaboration. Career-focused instruction really requires that you have close relationships with the faculty and close relationships with the industry. This is really a coming together of, as a librarian, my understanding about information literacy and study of workplace information literacy and their understanding of the specific needs of the field. The other piece of this is, in that part of that collaboration, is that associating the program with the school itself helps us to create that legitimacy. The Temerlin Institute is very well regarded, and they find this program to be rigorous enough that they're willing to put their name on it. So that rigor is demonstrated through our instruction and our assessment. We really see when we say a student is information literacy, we see that as a promise to the employer that the student will, that the new employee will be able to perform. And so the same level of proficiency is expected for all students. In other words, we're expecting all A's. And so we're really, students are allowed to keep taking the test until mastery. And this is now the third semester we've done this. Our first semester I had maybe a couple students who had to retake tests, and they all did, and then passed the second time. Last semester we had a great class. They all passed the first time. This semester has been interesting. We have several students who will need to retake. But we're really not going to give that badge until they've mastered the level that we expect for that. And then transparency. We have a website. We have the badge in which they can attach that to their LinkedIn account, and we're starting to look at attaching their artifacts onto that badge. So I won't read through all of these, but we did a study last semester that we're writing up an article on currently, but this is some of the responses that we got from the student self-evaluations from the end. Some of the things that I really like to see is that they are seeing that they are sharpening their strategic skills, that they're able to draw conclusions, that they're able to diversify how they're approaching their research. So and I can take any questions as soon as I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Megan. I think your program is really robust, and one thing that I'm wondering about is what the workload is like for that when you are reviewing and assessing the work of the students for that entire program. Is that something that is, takes a lot of your time?
Yes, it is definitely an intense program for sure. And it's really the instruction that takes the most time, not the grading. I just did all my grading yesterday. But we have roughly like 20 students in the program. This is it's a very specific program. This is just advertising undergrads in specific courses. And so, but the decision was that this was, it's worth enough for that degree program to do this. And actually what this has become is a replacement for curriculum mapping for that department. So as my work as a liaison, it fits really well within that. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
It does, yeah, and I think we have the same challenge with my program, that we really want it to be a very meaningful and robust badge. But it takes time for people to actually go through and do all of the work to review it.
It does, and kind of taking pieces of it and seeing how much of this can we deliver in a static tutorial, and when can we really optimize our, the time, and when we really need to do in-person instruction.
Right.
I think I do 5 in-class sessions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we had just a couple other questions come up in the chat. So Tori was wondering if you have seen any interest from external programs to the advertising program at Temerlin.
You mean programs other than advertising? or programs external to us?
Oh, probably, yeah, other than advertising, which I was wondering the same thing.
Yes. So I actually also work with corporate communications and public affairs, and we are looking at doing a similar program starting next year. Some of the ways they do research is similar, so I won't need to redo everything, but I do really want to make it specific to the needs of that actual discipline. So yeah, we're looking at doing that in a year.
Great. And I'm wondering too, you know, you have such a good partnership with the advertising faculty. Does that really make a big difference having, you know, because the faculty also have to kind of take on that burden of reviewing?
Yes, it's 100% essential. Especially what makes this level of rigor successful is that we can embed it within courses. And we have one, like there's 2 courses embedded in one that we've been doing this whole time, and we're adding a second course next semester because it takes a lot of time out of that course. But so I do have a faculty champion, but at this point the whole department recognizes the value and supports that. So we have pieces of it that are also delivered in other courses.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned you're using Canvas. Are you using one of their badging applications like the Badger third-party app, or are you using your own system and then just tying it in with the Canvas modules?
Yeah, I just use Canvas to deliver the modules. We use Credly for the badges. I'm currently, my university is just now starting a university badging system, so I'm going to look into whether we want to attach to that in future.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I know we had a few closing comments that I think Tori was going to talk about. If anyone has any last-minute questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We also have our Padlet that you can continue to put your ideas on, and you can check out our LibGuide as well, but I think Tori's going to talk a bit about that. So, Megan, if you could just pass your ball over to Tori in case she has any slides or screen to share, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, everyone, for presenting. I really learned a lot from the presentations today, so that was great. We have a follow-up activity to the presentation, and it is on our LibGuide for the Digital Badges Interest Group. So I'm just popping that URL directly into the chat. But what this that direct link that I just put in the chat takes you to is a Padlet. And so you can just, Padlets are very easy to use. There's a prompt there at the top. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little button with a plus sign. If you click that, it will pop open a note for you and you just start typing. And Kelsey has an example in the Padlet already for what their new badges or their updated badges look like at University of Albany. So you can kind of take that model to run with it. And the prompt is, what is one takeaway that you will remember from the webinar? So we will also post the webinar recording link on here. So if you have any colleagues that missed this, definitely refer them to that webinar link. And we want to thank everyone for attending the presentation today and staying engaged with the presenters. So we have, in addition to the LibGuide, we also have a listserv for the Digital Badges Interest Group that should become more active here in the coming months. So definitely keep that in mind too for connections with the group. So if there are no further questions, that is the end of our presentation today. So thank you for participating, and we look forward to continuing conversations about badging with you. And thank you to both of our presenters, Megan and Amanda, for coming in today and sharing their work.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And I think we can stop the recording.